Here at NATO, I was glad to welcome the new US Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, to NATO for the first time. Secretary Hegseth came with a clear message of America's enduring commitment to a strong NATO alliance and of America's clear expectations for all allies to carry their fair share of the burden. We also discussed the situation in Ukraine, together with Minister Umerov. All allies and Ukraine are united in their desire for peace in Ukraine. We all agree that we need to put Ukraine in the best possible position for negotiations. And we need a durable and lasting peace, not a Minsk III. So we had an excellent set of discussions focused on the urgent work ahead. When it comes to keeping our deterrence and defense strong, we endorsed robust defense plans drawn up by Supreme Allied Commander General Cavoli to protect our 1 billion people. To ensure we are fully ready to execute these plans, also in the future, we need more military capabilities. And for that, we need significantly more defense spending. So there is no time to waste. Our continued freedom and prosperity depend on it. Defense spending is already growing. Since 2014, European allies and Canada have added more than 700 billion additional US dollars for defense. In 2024, NATO allies in Europe and Canada invested 485 billion US dollars in defense, a 20% increase compared with 2023. With a full two-thirds of allies spending at least 2% of their GDP on defense. But we need to do more, much more, and we need to do it faster. It is clear from our discussions today that allies recognize the need to invest much more. Several announced large increases in spending in today's meeting. And I expect many ministers to return home from today's meeting with an even greater sense of urgency. We also discussed the need to ramp up defense production as we ramp up defense spending. Our industry must be able to produce what our extra money allows us to procure. We have already seen a significant increase in defense production across the alliance in recent years. We are producing more and faster than at any time in decades. But we can and must do more. To ensure the credibility of our deterrence and defense for years to come, we need to shift to a wartime mindset. And we need industry to shift with us. Industry has taken steps to improve production capacity, but they can do better. The demand signals are clear, and they'll continue to grow. Today, we agreed an updated action plan to rebuild a strong defense industry on both sides of the Atlantic. A robust defense industry will make the alliance stronger and create more jobs in Europe and North America. Allies also met with Ukraine in the NATO-Ukraine Council, and we are joined by the EU High Representative Kaja Kallas. Defense Minister Umerov briefed allies on the latest developments on the ground. And allies took note of President Trump's initiative for peace talks, which Secretary Hegseth had already outlined in our consultations within the UDCG yesterday afternoon. We discussed the importance of our continued support to Ukraine, which is crucial so that this brutal war of aggression can come to a just and lasting end. And we discussed the need for European allies and Canada to do even more. In 2024, NATO allies provided over 50 billion euros in security assistance to Ukraine. Nearly 60% of this coming from Europe and Canada. This is well above the 40 billion that we had pledged for the year. The newly established NATO command in Wiesbaden, Germany, is at the forefront of coordinating these contributions. This command is now operational and is doing important work. And allies announced new military support packages yesterday and today. This will help Ukraine in its fight today and to build up Ukraine's armed forces in the long term. All of this sends a clear signal that Europe and Canada are taking on a greater proportion of the transatlantic burden sharing. So we had an honest and forthright discussion among ourselves and with Ukraine. And we are coming out our meetings over the past 24 hours with a clear sense of purpose, commitment and urgency. And with that, I'm ready to take your questions.
All right. We'll start with Sky News.
Thank you, Deborah Haynes from Sky News.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Are all NATO allies united behind Ukraine in this, what President Zelensky has said, this belief that no negotiation on ending the war can take place without Ukraine at the table? And are allies united that Ukraine cannot be forced into an agreement unless it actually accepts the conditions?
What we are clearly united about is that, first of all, we have to make sure that when talks start, Ukraine is in the best possible position. And obviously this is about Ukraine, so Ukraine will be involved in any way and whatsoever. And at the same time, we are also in total agreement that an outcome has to be durable. As Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, said yesterday, we cannot have a Minsk III again. So whenever the outcome is there, we have to make sure that Putin will not try to grab another square mile, kilometer of Ukraine.
All right, we'll go to Reuters.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. You have said repeatedly that Ukraine needs to be put in a position of strength before talks could start. But President Trump has said that talks are starting immediately. So does that mean that Ukraine is now starting negotiations from a position of weakness?
No, and I do not completely agree with you, because what will happen, of course, even if talks start, they will not end on day one or day two. So there is, let's say, a path there where we have to make sure that talks are successful, and it is important that we get to a peace deal, and at the same time to make sure that Putin understands that the West is united, that Ukraine is getting all the support it needs to prevail. That is very important, but also that he understands that we will only conclude those talks when we are absolutely assured that the outcome can be sustained, that the outcome is enduring, is lasting.
All right, RBC, Ukraine.
Milan Lilic, RBC Ukraine News Agency. Secretary General, do you believe that Vladimir Putin really wants to end the war now, as President Trump said it yesterday? Thank you.
Well, I don't know what is exactly in President Putin's mind, of course, neither can you. I have had many meetings with him between 2010 and 2014 in my previous role. He is a strong negotiator. He is very unpredictable. But in the end, if we want to get to a peace deal, we need him there because he was the one starting this war of aggression against your country. So we have to make sure that we navigate those talks in a way that the outcome is such that it is clear to the whole world that there is a strong deal, that also the Indo-Pacific countries like China, but also a country like North Korea, and even in the Middle East, Iran, know that it is the West which is prevailing.
BBC. In the center, we'll get the mic to you.
Your voice is so commanding, you don't need it.
Yeah, Jonathan Beale, BBC.
Hi.
Boris Pistorius, the German defense minister, said it was regrettable that the Trump administration had made concessions before negotiations had begun. Similar message from the EU foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas. Not a good idea. Would you agree with them?
Well, I'm not in a position to comment on everything everybody is saying, but I would not be surprised about President Trump's views on this. He has been clear during the election campaign, and we knew for a couple of days that talks were imminent, at least that a phone call with President Putin was imminent, and that phone call took place yesterday. And now we have to make sure collectively that we do everything to make sure that we get to a lasting outcome of those talks.
All right, Moscow Times, please.
Thank you. Secretary General, many experts say that after yesterday's President Trump's speech, that the agreement, if it might be signed, the peace agreement, if it might be signed in the way, in the tone which was articulated by the Washington, will make Moscow and President Putin stronger, and it might lead to President Putin's decision that he can challenge some other countries. If yes, do you agree with this? And who he might challenge or attack, as experts say?
Well, I have not seen the outcome of peace negotiations. They have not even started. What I know is that all allies here today, and I know that the White House thinks the same, are of the opinion that we have to make sure, yes, that there is peace in Ukraine, that we end this awful situation, this war of aggression where hundreds of thousands of people have now been dead or seriously injured on both sides of the border. And it is really horrible. So we want to end this. But of course you have to make sure that you conduct those talks in a way where the outcome is such that it will not be seen as a loss to the West, one, and two, that we make sure that the outcome is seen as enduring, that it will not be challenged again, like we have seen after Crimea and after the Minsk Accords in 2014, where immediately basically moving forward to 2015 and 2016, Putin started to challenge the outcome of these agreements.
Bloomberg, behind the cameras.
Secretary General, this is Andrea Palesciano from Bloomberg. President Trump has said that negotiations are effectively starting. Europeans are not in the conversation right now. They're not at the table. What can European allies, European NATO allies do to get back in the conversation? And what exactly can they offer? What can they put on the table to be included in these discussions?
Well, clearly we are intensely consulting amongst each other, including with the United States. I will be myself in Munich tomorrow, meeting with Vice President Vance. Kellogg, the special representative for Ukraine, special representative for President Trump, will be here at NATO on Monday. Yesterday I had dinner with Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense of the United States. So we are, as NATO, and the teams are, of course, intensely coordinating. And I know that many allies and many EU member states are doing the same with Washington. So we are really, and what we did the last 24 hours was also very much about getting to the same page. And this is a democratic alliance. You do not always start with concurring positions. But in these 24 hours, what I have seen was a tremendous sense of unity and of convergence of views, and maybe not on everything and every detail, but still an alliance moving united forward.
All right, staying in the same part of the room, woman in the white blouse and beige vest.
Good afternoon. My name is Julia Sarivan. I'm from Republic of Moldova, representing here Journal TV. So, Mr. Rutte, last night the airspace of the Republic of Moldova was overflown by Russian drones. Some of them even exploded on the Moldovan territory, which is very serious and endangers the lives of our citizens. What can allies do to help Moldova to protect its airspace? Because it's really dangerous right now, and as we speak, Moldovan citizens are in danger.
Well, as you know, many allies, I hosted Maya Sandu, the president of Moldova, here myself in late 2024, I think it was in December. So we are having a lot of talks and consultations. And many allies are also bilaterally supporting Moldova. The European Union is very much involved because we all care about your beautiful country. And to make sure that you prevail in this ongoing, let's say, yeah, you would call it hybrid in the past, but this is really destabilization campaigns and sometimes even state-sponsored terrorism against your country. And this is what we are doing, working together on this, consulting, and making sure that we are on the same page. That is very important.
All right, and just behind her, Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung.
Thanks a lot, Thomas Kutschka with Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung. Secretary General, yesterday the US Secretary of Defense also said that in the future, Europeans need to take ownership of their own, as he said, conventional security. How do you read this? Does it mean that we should expect the bulk of the US forces in Europe, which are about 100,000 at the moment, will be withdrawn from the continent? Did you discuss this with him? Did you get any assurances? And would it be wise for Europeans to basically foresee a situation where the US only provides a nuclear umbrella, but no longer any conventional protection? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And you know, Pete Hegseth visited Stuttgart on Tuesday. And on a question, I think, by you or one of your colleagues said that there are no plans to reduce troop levels. That's wrong. At the same time, the US is quite irritated, basically for a long time, and Trump made this very clear when he came on board in 2016, 2017, about the fact that the US is spending much more on defense than the average is in the rest of NATO, in Canada and in Europe. So we have to do more. Last year we spent 20% more. US NATO allies. So if you take out US from the numbers, the rest of NATO spent 20% more. So we can do this. But it is not nearly enough. When you look at the capability targeting process, and when you then from there start to see the emerging gaps, it has to be much and much more than this famous 2%. It will be more than 3% at least. So here he is right. And the good thing, of course, is when we in the rest of NATO spend more, that there will be more of a burden sharing with what the US is doing, because the US itself is now on about 3.3, 3.4, 3.5%, depending on which year and how you calculate it. So that burden shift is necessary. But to your concrete question, I think Pete Hegseth was very clear in Stuttgart.
Let's see. Here. Woman in the second row.
Yuri Belat, Holland Media, Russian Media in Exile. I wanted to ask you about, like yesterday, NATO already did what Putin wanted, dropped off the idea of Ukraine membership in alliance in the foreseeable future. If this is how NATO will make Putin to start the talking process, but just give him what he wants?
Well, listen, in Washington again, NATO committed to future NATO membership for Ukraine. But it has never been agreed that whenever peace talks would start, that peace talks would end anyway and always and definitely with NATO membership. That has never been agreed. It could be, but it never was that clearly stated. What I consistently have said is we have to make sure that whatever the outcome is, we have to make sure that Vladimir Putin will never, ever try again to attack Ukraine. That is crucial. And then you and I, as I said yesterday, we can spend time, and not for a long time, I think in 10 minutes, we can think of 5 or 10 ways to make sure that we have those guarantees in place for Ukraine going forward. But there has never been a promise to Ukraine that as part of a peace deal, they would be in NATO.
All right, and now we'll go to the woman in the black jacket.
Lucrezio, Rai Italian Public Television. U.S. Secretary of Defense said that U.S. are interested towards Indo-Pacific and China more than Europe. So European Union states, they are a little bit concerned about this. What do you think about?
Spend more. And those not on 2% get to the 2% by this summer. And those on 2% prepare for much, much more. And it will be north of 3%. Because what is behind this is two things. One is the genuine issue that the US has to concentrate on multiple theaters, including on the Indo-Pacific. Absolutely. China, etc. It is a great worry for them. And rightly so. But also a continuous debate they're having with European allies. Hey guys, we are spending over 3%, 3.5% on average in the US, and you are close to 2% or not even at 2% in the rest of NATO. So they are right. They have every right to be extremely irritated because we are saying, yeah, but spending more, that might mean maybe saving somewhere else or increased taxation or, yeah, hey, guess what? That's the same for the US. When you spend 3.5% on defense, then you cannot spend it on your pensions or you cannot lower your taxes by that amount. So they're absolutely clear. So I think these two things come together. US has to concentrate on Europe, yes, but also on other issues. And by the way, when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, and many allies today made that point, these theaters get more and more interconnected, with North Korea, China and Iran backing up Putin, particularly North Korea and China being over there in the Indo-Pacific region. As I said before to you, I have sometimes more phone calls coming out of Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand from senior politicians there than from some NATO allies. So they're really worried about what's happening there. They want us to work closer together. And I also said today, if the US, rightly so, sees China and other emerging situations in the Indo-Pacific as an emerging threat to that country, then we have to face that together. Not that NATO is now expanding to the Indo-Pacific, but then you have to work together as an alliance how to make sure that those security threats of the US are also a concern for us here in Europe.
NHK.
All right, you've been listening live there to the head of NATO, Mark Rutte, speaking in Brussels. This a day after Donald Trump